Using diagrams to find the number of groups. So we're going to talk about using tape diagrams to help us think about division and fractions. Okay, so today's ICANNs, I can use a tape diagram to represent equal sized groups and find the number of groups. So make sure you have your ICANNs, today's date, and page number, and you're ready to move on. All right, let's do a little bit of thinking with how many of these in that. So if we think of 10 divided by 2 1/2, we can think of it as 2 1/2 groups in 10. So how many 2 1/2 groups can we get out of 10? Well, what's that going to look like on the diagram here? Well, we need to break these into 2 1/2 groups, right? So there's one set, there's another set, and there's another set. So now we've got this broken up into 2 1/2 groups. How many groups did we make? 4, right? How do I know that that's true? Well, because I've taken 10 and broken it up into groups of 2 1/2. So there's my 2 whole and then the half, and I split that with the next one. Same with the other parts. Okay. What about here? How many groups of 2 are in 7? So again, this is going to be 7 divided by 2, right? So we need to make groups of 2. Well, we have 3 complete groups, right? What about here? Yeah, it's a fraction, isn't it? We need 2 to make that work. And out of those 2, we only have 1. So 7 divided by 2 is 3 1/2. Why is that? Because we're looking for groups of 2. We can get 3 full groups and 1/2 of another. All right, let's talk about representing groups of fractions with tape diagrams. So we're going to take a couple minutes here on this one here. And let's think about this. So this question says, how many 2/3 are in 1? So the equations that Andre wrote to make this work out is we've got something times 2/3 gives us 1, or we can also think of it as 1 divided by 2/3 gives us something. So before we used pattern blocks to answer something like this. How can this help us figure this out? Well, it's the same kind of thing as what we did before, but with the tape diagram, we can see that we've got here one group of 2/3, right? So we know that it is one complete group of 2/3. We've got one part left here. This is a third, but how many thirds does it take to make that group of 2/3? Well, 2, right? Because it's 2/3. So I only have one of the 2 parts that I need. So how many 2/3 are in 1? 1 1/2. What kind of magic is this? There's no magic here. You're just talking about taking 1, breaking it up into thirds. And so basically it's like what we were talking about on the previous lesson. We know that we need thirds, so we cut all this into thirds. So we make 3 parts. But we need to take those thirds, because we get 3 parts out of that one whole, and we can see that we're going to be grouping that up into groups of 2 of those thirds. So that's why we get 1 whole and we have 1/2 left, because we're missing another 1/3 here to make that a complete 2. So we only have 1 1/2 here to solve this equation. And that's what this diagram does. It does basically what we were talking about with the pattern blocks, but in a different way that can be a little bit quicker than drawing out a bunch of pattern blocks. Okay, so let's do a few of these. How many 3/4 are in 1? We need a multiplication and a division for each of these. So what do we got for this one? Yeah, we should have something times 3/4 gives us 1 whole, or 1 divided by the 3/4 gives us something. Okay, so let's go ahead and take, and I'm going to draw this a little bit big so I can see it a little bit easier for you. So there we have in fourths, right? Okay, it says how many groups of 3/4 can we make out of this? Well, there's one group of 3/4, right? So far our answer is one group of 3/4. But we have a part left over here. How much is that part? Well, it is one part, right, out of the total 3 that we need. See, there's 3/4 here. I've only got one of those 3/4 here. So that's why it ends up being the 1 and 1/3. Because that 1/3 tells us that we have one of the 3 parts that we need to make a full part, but we don't have those. They're missing. How about here? We got 2/3 are in 3. What's the operation, or what's the equations look like? Yeah, it should have something times 2/3. Oop, hang on. Quinoa. Okay. Equals 3, or 3 divided by 2/3 gets us something. Okay, so I'm going to do kind of like I did up above. I'm going to make groups of thirds. Okay, so now I have, let me erase the in-between part here. So now I have 3 broken up into thirds, right? I need to make groups of 2/3. So there's one group, there's another group, and another group. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 complete groups. 4 complete groups of 2/3. I've got one more left over here. I've got one part of one. And that one part is out of 2. So my answer is 4 1/2. Because I can get 4 complete groups of 2/3, and I can get half of one of those 2/3. Okay, what about this one? How many 3/2 are in 5? So we have some number times 3/2 gives us 5, or we can think of it as 5 divided by 3/2 gives us something. Okay. Am I going to draw this out just like I did on the previous one? So I'm going to make halves on each part and count those to make my 1 wholes. So, oops, let me fix that real quick here. Okay, so I've got my 5, right? I broke them up into halves. I've got 5 parts here. Okay, and now I'm looking for groups of 3/2. So 1, 2, 3/2 there. 1, 2, 3/2 there. 1, 2, 3/2 there. So I've got 3 full groups, right? Again, it's groups of 3/2. And then I've got 1 part left over. How much is that 1 part, though? Yeah, that 1 part is 1 out of the 3 that we need to make a complete 3/2 group. So our answer on this one is 3 1/3. Why is it 3 1/3? Because we're missing 2 of the parts that we need, but we do have one of the three parts. All right, let's talk about finding number of groups. So here we have, we want to think about a diagram for each of these and talk about the multiplication and division for each of these so we can see if we can figure out what's going on. So I have, this first one says, how many 3/8 inch thick books make a stack that is 6 inches tall? So we need to take and find what? Yeah, if we think of it as division, we've got 6 inches. We need to see how many 3/8 of an inch we can find in that. By the same token, we can take that, we don't know how much is in each, or how much is in that stack, times the 3/8 that makes it up, gives us 6 inches. So what's that going to look like as a diagram? Well, if we have 6, we're going to break this up into groups of 8, right? Because if we cut this into eighths, we're going to talk about 48/8 there, right? Yeah, so I've got 48 parts total, but that's just if there was just 1/8. Oops, hang on. So that would be 48, but we have groups of 3/8. So now we have to see how many groups of 3 we can get in there. Well, if we know that we've got 48, we need to basically divide it by 3, right? 3 goes into 48. 3 goes into that 4 one time. 4 minus 3 is 1. 18 minus, let's see, 6 goes into, or 3 goes into 18 6 times. So there are 16 books in that stack. Can we prove it? Sure. 16 times 3/8 would give us 48/8, which 48 divided by 8 gives us the 6. What about here? How many groups of 1/2 pound are there in 2 3/4 pounds? Okay, first let's think about the division would be 2 3/4 divided by 1/2 gives us our answer. Or we can think of it as our answer times 1/2 gets us 2 3/4. Okay. What's that look like? Let me erase something here so I got space. So I have 2 3/4 here, right? So what I need to do is, it's telling me that I'm going to cut those in halves, right? So I'm basically going to end up doubling what I've got, right? And I know my drawing is a little difficult to see, but basically what we're doing is we're taking every one of those parts and cutting them in half to see how many we get. Well, we're going to end up with twice as many as what we started with, right? Because we're cutting each of those in half. So what's our missing number? Well, we go through and we're actually going to see that we have 5 and 1/2 is our missing number here. How do I know that to be true? Well, if I take and double 2, that makes 4. If I double 3/4, that gives me 6/4, which gives me another 1 whole 4/4, right? So add that to the 4 that I already have, making 5. I've got 2/4 left over, makes 5 and 1/2. All right, so kind of what was going on is, in a question like how many 3/4 are in 6, or 6 divided by 3/4, What does each of these numbers mean? The 6 is how much our total is, right? The 3/4 is how much we're putting in each group. What's a tape diagram look like for this? It's going to be 6 broken up into fourths. And then figuring out how many groups of 3/4 we can make out of that. Diagram can help us look at, especially if we draw out every single part. I'm not drawing that out here because I'm just kind of wrapping up. Because then we can physically see those groups of 3/4. When we get to the end of it, if we have something left over, then we know that there are a total of 3 parts, right? So that becomes our denominator. And then if it's just one piece or two pieces, we put a 1 or a 2 depending on how many pieces are left over. Okay? Doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be always a full even number. We use the pattern blocks, the fraction strips, and other diagrams. The tape diagrams, I think, kind of are just showing another way to break them up. Okay. All right, we're going to skip that last part because we are way out of time here right now. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.